not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. What you can do for your country. Your country. Your country.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to The Big Picture. We kind of have a different look today. This is going to be a special episode. I'm here with my good friend Jon, and we had some information that we wanted to talk about and share with you today. I know that a lot of you viewers know that we were on the Six Screens Telenetwork. And for those that don't know, I have left the Six Screens Telenetwork because I didn't want my videos being responsible for getting Rick Farron's channel shut down. Plus, another reason why I left is because of some of the viewers on that channel. They would call in, be disrespectful. Even on other programs, callers would call in and harass the guests. So I don't think that's cool. We folks that do these videos, we work hard. We try to find good guests to bring to folks. And when they get attacked or we get attacked, I'm sorry, we kind of take that personal. And if you don't want to listen to what we have to say, then you can just turn it off. You have the freedom to do that. So tonight's episode is just going to be me and Jon having a conversation, talking about things that are going on in this world. And we'll just see how it goes, and hopefully some of the information that we bring out you will find useful and valuable for yourself and for your waking up process. Because I think that's the biggest thing I want to discuss today, Jon, is the fact that there's just so many distractions out there in this world that people just keep going from one distraction to the next. Yeah. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, it is. It really reminds me of our days in the cult, because there was always something new to distract you from the fact that the old thing never happened. Like the thing that they were talking about before never happened, and so there's a new thing to pay attention to. And when we left, and then through the past 3 years of total nonsense garbage,
we're gonna touch on that.
Yeah, there was always a new distraction. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. There is always something to distract people. And whatever you think of Elon and whatever you think of Trump, after the bank SVB went under, and then Credit Suisse got taken over, and then the other Silvergate went under, these banks are collapsing. Mm-hmm. There's a severe liquidity problem with the U.S. dollar. You probably haven't heard of that because it's nowhere in the media. But there's a severe U.S. dollar liquidity problem right now. People can't get access to dollars they need, and the world runs on U.S. dollars, so that's a problem. Yep. But you don't hear about that. What do you hear about? Trump is getting arrested. That's what you hear about. That's what you see. It's a constant distraction. Don't look at the man behind the curtain kind of scenario. And sadly, it works with a lot of people, but it doesn't work with as many people as it used to, because I think the last 3 years they pushed too hard, they did too much. A lot of people are awake, myself included, Jimmy first, me next. And I think that you, whoever you are, if you don't already know this, you need to pay attention to it, because people are trying to distract your attention away from what's important to serve their own needs and not yours. And that's what we want to talk about.
Yeah. So first off, let's recap. Let's recap these last 3 years very shortly, okay? All right. So
BS. There you go. Recap over.
I know. Yeah. I know the last 3 years I have taken a lot of heat. I've been called conspiracy theorist. I've been called a right-winger. I've been called a Trump loyalist. I mean, I have been called every name in the book. But you know what? I don't care, because I'm still here and I'm still trying to get this information out to folks. I will continue to fight no matter what anybody wants to call me. And so looking back at 2020, when CV hit, because there's some viewers that don't know our story.
Yeah, sure.
So just real briefly, what was your reaction when CV came into play and then when I mentioned stuff to you.
Sure. Okay, so first of all, to make it clear, Jimmy and I are good friends, but we don't always agree on everything.
Absolutely.
He holds positions I disagree with. I hold positions he disagrees with. One thing we absolutely are in agreement about, though, is the financial system. We'll talk about that.
Yeah.
But as far as the CV thing goes, okay, so when it was in January when they first started the narrative, right? And at that point, I wasn't concerned, whatever. And I even made a video on the XJW channel about it. I had the end of the world scenarios thrown at me all the time. So I'm not just going to buy into them, right? But then there started to be more and more and more. And people started to get concerned. And I was like, okay, these guidelines are starting to come out. I'm a pragmatic individual. We don't know anything yet. We don't have any data yet. We'll abide by any recommendations to be safe. And so we were. We did the hand washing thing, and we stayed away from public places, which is actually great for me because I'm an introvert. And plus stuff was starting to shut down anyway, so it's not like we could go out to eat or whatever. And we were just cautious. I wore the mask, even though I hated those things. Jimmy never did. Good for him. And Jimmy would tell me that he didn't think any of this stuff was for real. And we would have these back and forth, long books worth of text messages back and forth with audio and images and screenshots of me.
Oh, we had some intense conversations. And that's just to hold your thought for a second.
Sure.
And that's the thing, what we want to show people here as well. This is an example of two gentlemen that have different views on things, but we're not bashing each other.
Yeah.
I don't call him names. He doesn't call me names. I would say that we probably agree about 93%.
Oh,
93%.
Most things. Yeah. There's just that one section of things that we vehemently disagree on, but most things we agree.
So I wanted to make that point that this is how you have conversations with folks. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Back then, our agreement level was probably 60-40.
Probably.
Now it's like 90-10.
Yeah.
And Jimmy hasn't changed. I learned a lot in that time period. So again, kudos to Jimmy for getting all that right. So when the CDC finally released their data in the fall, because I'm a very data-driven individual, and I saw the numbers, I'm like, oh, okay, there's not a problem. The data shows there's no real problem. All the deaths, the average life, age of death was after the average life expectancy. So what does that tell you? Old people, very sick people are dying, not healthy, younger individuals. Nothing unusual about it. Then I thought, oh, okay, they're going to change things now. At least for comorbidities on average. There's no reason for anyone to be concerned about this thing. But nothing changed.
Yep.
Data came out, nothing changed. In fact, it got worse. They doubled down on it. Then that's what triggered all my alarm bells and red flags. Wait a minute, you have the data and you're still acting like it's the end of the world. What are you up to? And that's when I started to deep dive into things. And for the first time, I started to study things like masks. Decades of studies we have on masks and how they do nothing for viruses, airborne viruses at all. Nothing. There's zero data that they're beneficial. So again, red flag. Wait. And even Fauci back in 2020 in the spring said, oh, don't bother. Total waste of time.
March.
And then boom, change completely.
Yep.
Where 2? Where 3? Whatever. Why? Why the sudden change when the data says something? And that told me one thing, that it had nothing to do with health. Something else was at play here. And of course, then the rest of the time played out, continued to show that was true. And now a lot more of that stuff has come to light. Pfizer released all their data by force. They didn't want to. How many decades was it?
They wanted to have it hidden for 75 years.
75 years. Nothing says trust us more than we're not going to tell you what really happened for 75 years. Nothing like that.
Exactly.
Yeah, if your spouse or significant other comes home and you ask where they were and they say, I'll tell you in 75 years, you need to pack your bags and leave because there's something funny going on here. That's the truth. But that's what they did. And nothing else screams, trust us, like we have no liability because the government said so. Don't ever put anything in your body where the person who manufactures it is not liable at all for what happens to you when you take it. That's called it's stupid. I don't know. There's no other word I can think of. That's a stupid thing to do. Don't do that. But I also understand that fear is a powerful motivator, and fear was force-fed down people's throats over the past 3 years. But we're used to that.
Oh, absolutely.
From the cult. That's what they did.
I was listening to an audio file on my way here, and it talked about fear, that fear does two things. One, it causes you not to act, meaning you're like an ostrich. You put your head in the sand because the wind is blowing. You put your head down in there, and then eventually you pick your head up to see if the wind's gone. All right. If it's not gone, you put your head back down. And the second thing that fear causes you to do is to make horrible decisions. And I think that's what, I mean, and we can see it now. I mean, 3 years passed, and I can go out into the stores and I still see people with masks on.
Yeah.
It's like, did you not get the memo?
There are two things that I've noticed about that even now you still see people. One thing is that there's two classes of people I see.
Yes.
And I'm not political. I'm not on either side of the aisle at all. I think they're both full of shit. I don't like any of them. That's another way in which we're in some ways. Yeah. I'm not political. Jimmy is more political. And anyway, the point is, people who are very, very far left will still wear a mask, right? Which tells me that's a political statement, has nothing to do with health, because there are no mandates or anything like that, at least not here, that they should have to do it. So that's a political statement, not a health one. One. And two, the other group I see are the least educated people, the people who are the most prone to fear. So it's like the most educated and the least educated people are the people that seem to fall for these things the most. The PhDs and the didn't get out of high schools seem to be the ones that fall for it the most. And I think the one is because of indoctrination and the other is because of ignorance. I really believe that's it. Like normal people like us, who, like, I'm not a PhD. I didn't even go to college. I'm a self-taught software developer, you know. And Jimmy is an excellent insurance salesman. So we're normal people, and normal people aren't as prone to fall for these kinds of things as long as they got a little bit going on. And our background coming out of a cult taught us not to just trust everyone. And I have a friend of mine who made a really good point, only he was talking about trust in general. And he came from a bad family. And he went to an Ivy League school, got on a scholarship, but he's poor. Like he wasn't wealthy like these other kids who became his friends. And he said, I came from a family where I knew I couldn't trust my family. And so I came out of a circle of distrust. Whereas all these people I went to college with, they had good families, which you would call a good family. Mm-hmm. And so they came out of a belief that they could trust the circle. So they continued to trust the circle as that circle grew to the college, to the state, to the government, whatever. Whereas someone like me and someone like this other friend of mine, because of our circumstances, him coming out of a bad family, us coming out of a cult, we're not inclined to just trust the circle because we've learned that you cannot trust the circle. And I think that's the real difference. Most normal people, they came from a reasonably decent background, decent home life, whatever. You know, there are exceptions, but mostly they don't have any reason to just doubt everything until you do.
Yeah. Oh, and I tell you what, that's one thing that folks have learned about me is I literally question everything.
As well you should.
And, you know, if we go back to the time that we were in the cult of Watchtower, that was one of the things that we could not do was ask questions. And so when we tried to ask questions, we were shot down, we were labeled, and we were made to feel insignificant because our questions weren't being validated. They weren't being answered. And if we kind of transfer that to the bigger scene of things, if you ask questions on social media or if you put your thoughts out on social media, what's happening? You're getting censored. You're being told, no, you shouldn't do that, or no, you shouldn't say that. Why? What did Watchtower have to hide? What is the political, social environment trying to hide from everybody? And that's where folks like Jon and I, we've worked really hard at honing our skills on using discernment and trying to back up everything that we talk about with that facts, data, and evidence. Now, when it comes to learning, we've said this before, when it comes to me and Jon, I go on my intuition.
Mm-hmm.
Jon goes on data. Data takes a little more time to catch up to intuition. However, intuition, sometimes I could be wrong about something. And you know what? We've talked about this before too. That's okay. At least I'm using my brain and trying to figure out what's going on than just sticking my head in the sand and be like, oh, whatever, what can I do? I'm just one person. No, there's a lot one person can do.
I agree. Data versus intuition definitely have their pros and cons, their strengths and weaknesses. But regardless of which side you tend to fall on, if something just doesn't make sense to you, if when someone tells you something, you're like, that doesn't sound right, don't just nod and agree. Because our tribal nature as human beings is we don't like to rock the boat as a rule. We find it uncomfortable. It's how we've built the great civilizations of the world, right? We tend to cooperate. It's why commerce works. It's why you can drive on the road and not worry about imminent death, because most people are going to follow the rules most of the time. It's in our nature to do so. But that's a pro and a con, because you can be conned if you listen to people and just nod and agree just because someone tells you something. There's a logical fallacy called argument from authority that people tend to fall for. Well, that guy sounds educated and he works for the government and he's got all this authority over all those people. He must be right. Whereas Jimmy's just an insurance salesman who likes to go to rock concerts and lose his voice. I don't have to listen to him about that. And sometimes that's true. Sometimes that is true. Sometimes people who have more education and more experience, it is wise to listen to them. But don't be fooled, because a lot of times those same individuals, especially when you're dealing with large institutions and the government, are going to tell you what they want you to hear rather than what the facts are. And we're seeing that right now with the Fed, because of the money liquidity problem.
Yep.
They're coming out and saying everything's fine. There are no problems here. We're getting in cozy with all the other central banks and we're fixing this problem. But if you actually listen to people who have a long history in the monetary system talk about this, so like, that's utter garbage. What the Fed is saying has no real impact on what's actually going on in the world of finance and in the world economy. They don't know what to do, which is why they keep inventing new 4-letter programs of things to do, because if what they could do actually worked, it would have already worked. It didn't work, so they invented something else to try to make you think that it's going to work, but of course, it's not really working.
So the people that created the problem are trying to give you the solution.
Yeah.
Why do you trust that?
Though most people, to be fair, most people watching this probably don't trust that already.
Yeah.
There's probably a lot of people who don't trust that already. Just use good sense and research these things. It's publicly available information, even from the most highly politicized websites. You can still get a lot of truth about history. The financial system is a big one. I know you think the dollars in your wallet or your purse have value, but they don't. They don't. It's called fiat, which means money by decree. It only has value because the government says it does. It's not backed by anything except violence, because if you don't pay your taxes, they'll come haul you away or take your stuff. It's not backed by any real asset. Up until 1971, the dollar was backed by gold. Well, not really, but they said it was. Up until in 1971, they gave up. We're not going to back it by gold anymore.
Yep.
And so at that point, it was no longer backed by any asset. It actually wasn't going all the way back to 1933, as far as we can tell. But they didn't let anybody know that because they wanted you to believe that it was still backed. But now it's not backed by anything. After gold was officially kaput, and we went to a fiat standard, the only thing the dollar got backed by was called the petrodollar, because oil had to be purchased. The United States had a lot of political power, and they made agreements with the big oil countries, OPEC, that they would only sell oil for U.S. dollars. And so that kept the dollar very strong for a very long time in comparison to other currencies. But the U.S. dollar is the cleanest shirt in the hamper, right? it may be stronger than the other currencies, but it has lost almost all its value since 1913. If you look at the chart, it goes just like that.
Yeah.
So today, you can buy a candy bar for I think it was a Hershey bar for $1.50.
No, we ain't buying Hershey's no more.
Oh, it's just an example. Just an example. I'm sure Hershey's is terrible. Go back to 1913. I think I forget the numbers, but you could buy 130 candy bars for the same price that you can buy one today.
Yeah.
What, is a candy bar suddenly more valuable than it was? No, the dollar's less valuable. Why do homes cost so much more now than they did 30 years ago? Is it because the home has more utility than it did? No, it's because the dollar's worth less than it used to be. You are being robbed every time the government prints money. Quick way to understand that, very easy way to understand that. Let's imagine there's only $1,000 in existence, all right, in the country. And every dollar represents 1 hour of your work. So you get paid $10 per hour, okay? You work an hour and you save that $10 in the bank. You have 1 hour of your work in the bank right now. But the government comes out and says, we're going through financial difficulties. We're going to create 1,000 more dollars to spend on whatever the thing of the day is. War. Whatever it is, they're going to spend the money on. But they didn't create more work. There's still only 1,000 hours worth of work in existence in the country. That didn't change. They just made more paper dollars. Mm-hmm. So now that there's $2,000 in existence. That dollar that you saved that was worth 1 hour of your time is now only worth half an hour of your time. They just stole half of your savings without your permission.
Yep.
That is how the financial system works today because money is not backed by an asset. The government doesn't have to go dig up more gold in order to create more dollars that are backed by that gold. They don't have to do anything but say, we decree, fiat, that we have more money now and we're going to spend it. So they're taking your time, your work, your life, if you want to look at it that way.
Yeah.
They're robbing that from you for their own ends, whatever it is they want to do. That's why fiat is so sinister. That's how the financial system we live under works today, and that's why it's falling apart, because you can only run that Ponzi for so long.
Yeah, and the thing is there's a lot of people out there that don't know the history about these fiat banks, the central bank or the central banks and systems, especially here in the United States. You know, this is what we're going through right now is the third central bank of the United States. The first one started in the late 1700s, and it actually had a charter for like 10 years. Well, the charter ran out, thank goodness, and the founding fathers didn't replenish that charter. But that didn't keep the central banks from, the Bank of England and all that, from putting that system into the United States. So they created a second central bank system around the 1815 mark, 1820 mark. But then Andrew Jackson came in and was like, he was saying basically everything that John just said. And he destroyed the second central bank. And so we didn't have one for a long time. Doesn't mean that they didn't stop trying to put it in. And so then, of course, in 1913, that's when they established the Federal Reserve. And there's a lot of information about that event and different things that took place during the history that created that event. And then after they put that into place, then what did they have to do? They had to distract everyone, ergo World War I. So
interesting timing. 1913, the Fed is created. That fall, we start World War I going into 1914.
And then 5 years later, after that distraction or event, whatever you want to call it, ran its course, then we had the Spanish flu.
Yeah.
All right. After that ran its course, then we had the fall of Wall Street, the Great Depression. So, and then World War II.
But before World War II, 1933, Roosevelt confiscated everyone's gold.
Yes.
Except a very small amount. And you can look this up. This is established history, 1933. Said, you have to give us all your gold, and we will pay you $20 an ounce for this gold. But you have to give it to us. You don't have a choice. I thought we lived in a free country. And so everyone had to hand over their gold. Why? Because people didn't trust the dollar anymore for good reason. I mean, it was starting to lose its actual standard as a gold-backed asset. So people were pulling all of their money, real money, gold, out of banks. Not just individuals, but also institutions saying, we don't want your dollars. They're not worth trash. They're just paper. We want gold. And, of course, the government can't create funny money if no one's using the funny money. And so they mandated everyone had to turn over their gold. Where did that gold go? Who knows? But the Fed still has the receipts. And those gold bonds they handed out to people, this is what your gold is worth. They still exist. They are still on record with the Fed. But where's all that gold? We don't know, because the U.S. has never audited their gold supply. It doesn't matter, because in 1971, not backed by gold anymore. But it's interesting that now, as fiat is collapsing, and you can see it happening, though it's not going to be fast, like overnight, I hope. But it is happening. You can see it with the melting down of the banks. 2008 was the beginning of the end. The Great Recession was the beginning of the end. When they really started doing quantitative easing, printing trillions of dollars of funny money, that's what really kick-started the end. They should have just let all those businesses fail, and they didn't. But when that happened, central banks quietly started to buy up gold. And if you, again, established history, look it up. Central banks all over the world are buying up gold like crazy, with a few odd exceptions like Canada. Most of them are. Why? Why do they care? If our gold, our money is so valuable, why are they all buying gold again?
Because they know something about it.
They know the money's valueless. And as soon as the music stops, everyone's going to realize there's not enough chairs. That's what's going to happen. That's the system we're living under now.
And I think what a lot of people need to realize is look for patterns, because these people, these banking systems, these governments of the world, it runs in patterns. And once you recognize the pattern of events and things that take place, you can actually foresee what's going to possibly happen. It's like when the whole thing was CV and that came out, I was like, yeah, this is bullcrap. I mean, because I saw a pattern. And it's kind of like in the political side of things, you know, we have so many different stories coming out in the media, and it's like, okay, well, what are they distracting us from? Oh, that's not true? Oh, well, what happened there? And so, but a lot of people don't think that way. They just look at what's being presented on TV, what they're seeing on social media, and just accept it without looking into it. And I think the hardest part for so many people is people have been indoctrinated for so long that when information comes to them that is opposite of what they thought, they don't want to accept it. They don't want to feel like they've been hoodwinked, so to speak.
Sunk cost fallacy. That's the logical fallacy there. You've done something for so long. You've put so much time and energy and effort into it. For you to believe that you've been duped that whole time is a huge, huge punch to your ego. And if your ego gets shattered, you feel insecure. So rather than accept the reality that you should now know is the reality based on the facts, you will reject it and persist. This has nothing to do with intelligence. This is a very deep-seated emotional thing built into humans. It's why so many people stayed stuck in the cult for so long, and many are still in it. Because if you're 80 years old and your entire life was spent believing this thing, and you only have a short time left, for you to accept that your entire life was a lie and a waste, imagine what that would do. You don't want to open that door. And so it's hard for people. It's hard. And we're lucky, we're not young, but we have enough years left that we both are like, we're not going to waste the rest of our life that we could be spending on something worthwhile in this or in the current system with CV and stuff and the funny money and just all the garbage. going along with a system that very clearly has been lying to people for a very long time. That is not a conspiracy. Do you trust politicians? Who do you know? Every survey we have, the approval rate of Congress is in the single digits. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that, what's her name? Pelosi. Is it Pelosi? One of the most amazing investing minds in the world somehow beats the market constantly over and over and over again. There was a Twitter user called the Pelosi Tracker, where every time she or her husband would make a trade, you could go see what they did so you could copy it. Why? Because she knows what's going on. She sits on the boards and the back meetings, and she knows. You think there's not corruption there? You think there's not insider trading there? I mean, come on, wake the F up.
I mean, for folks that don't know, the salary of a congressman, and they just voted themselves to have another pay raise, by the way. Of course they did. But I think it's an average of $180,000 for a congressman, and maybe a little over $200 for a senator. I don't have that exact figure, but how are these people worth millions of dollars?
Tens of millions.
Hundreds of millions of dollars on those salaries.
Yeah.
Is it because they're just really savvy financial gurus? No. There is some corruption going on, and that corruption is setting it up to take things away from the people. That's what it is. So you have the haves and the have-nots, and they're going to do everything that they can to keep their haves. But as we see, that is starting to fail tremendously.
Another point about the money system, there's what's called, I call it the Cantillon effect because last name's Leger, French, but it's Cantillon, I think, is how the normal English pronunciation is. Basically, it means the closer you are to where the money comes from, the more you benefit. So, for instance, the government printed, I have to laugh or I'll cry, 40% of the entire money supply in the United States in 2 years. $7 trillion. In 2 years, just boom, out of thin air. We magically create $7 trillion. No, they didn't. They magically stole it from you. But the point is, where did that money go to? It went to the people that were closest to the money printer, the government that produces the money, well, the Fed technically that produces the money, which is who? Big corporations. The people in the government themselves, the Pelosi Tracker, right? Those people got most of the money. What did you get? A little baby check for a couple of $1,000 maybe?
That you went out and bought a big screen TV with.
Yeah, well, I hope you did, because 2 years later, you've seen what inflation is doing to the price of everything. That money they gave you, gone. But when the corporations got it, they could immediately spend it before you got a dime on all these hard assets that have real value. Basically, the money was stolen from you, given to corporations. They bought real assets with it, and by the time you got the money, it was worth far less, and you got a tiny fraction of what they did. It's called the Cantillon effect. Look it up. It is a truth about the way the financial system works, and always has, not just now, but even in the past, before fiat currency, the people closest to the money supply always benefited the most. And that's what's going on right now. So small businesses get demolished, which I'm feeling, because that's my primary market as a software developer. Small business gets demolished, while who gets to stay open? Walmart, Costco, all the big boxes, right? Amazon made a killing.
Yeah, they did.
A new billionaire was created every 20 hours. 20 hours during all this nonsense. How's your pocketbook doing right now?
Exactly.
Compare the two and think. Do you think that's on accident? Why would you say you can't go to your local coffee shop where there's only 5 people, but you can walk into a Walmart with 300 people? That's way safer. Why would you do that? There's only one reason, and health has nothing to do with it. You are handing other people's money off to your buddies that paid for you to get into office. This is how the system works. It is corrupt AF. There is nothing about this that in any way is on the up and up. And if you still think that everything's fine and these people have our best interests at heart, oh my God, I got some land in Alaska that you are going to want to buy.
I'm just sitting there. I'm just sitting over here smiling and laughing because I'm like, go John, tell him. Because when we first started down this road, it was not like this.
Yeah, no.
And John is like just taking it, especially on the financial side, because this is where he's got his expertise on. And he's just rolling with it now. He's just dropping truth bombs on you folks. And I hope you are listening, and I hope you take some of the information that he's bringing out and go look it up. Because
it's all documented.
Yeah.
I'm not making this up. Go look these things. Look up the Federal Reserve, when it was created. Look at the value of the dollar. Look at all these things that are going on. And look at the history.
And look at what these corporations and these institutions, the charities, their little societies that they have, whether the tax-free societies, what are they funding? Okay? Yeah. And that's another thing that a lot of people don't want to think about. What are these people funding in the background? You know, we're not going to do this video tonight talking about all that stuff, but let's look at trafficking. Let's look at just the war profits, money laundering. Yeah, this is where all this money is going to. But we're not going to get into that tonight. We'd have to save that for another episode.
Let me just quote George Carlin. And it's not a precise quote, but he said, yeah, the government is a club, and you ain't in it.
Right.
You are not in the club. And anyone who thinks that individuals who would do all these things to all the little people, who insist on all these mandates, who insist on all this money going to countries that prior to recently you had never heard of, be honest. Why do you think that is? Why is that suddenly the flavor of the day? Why did they stop the CV and jump to this little country next to Russia? Now, I'll be the first to say, war is always a tragedy. I think all government and war is horrible and terrible and self-serving and disastrous.
Yep.
But why was it suddenly the thing of the day and CV took a back seat? Why? Why did it magically disappear? For almost everybody. Because they stopped believing it, and you needed something else to distract people's attention. We're back to
new
Trump.
Light.
Yeah, new light. We're back to Trump getting arrested because the banks are melting down. The timing is not a coincidence.
I got a lot to say about that, but I might do my own video on that.
Yeah, I don't know anything about that.
Yeah, I do.
I quit paying attention. But it was so obvious to me that it was a distraction.
Oh,
it was just so
totally.
obvious. And I don't care. Like, I'm not a Trump supporter. Jimmy and I have gone back and forth about that. Like, I don't care about what happens to Trump. But it was so obvious that they're grasping at straws and running out of things to distract people with. And who's always great for a distraction? Trump, because he's bombastic and loud and hated by the left and all that.
He's the bait.
He's easy to bait with. He's easy to bait with. Easy target. And he can't be quiet. So if something happens to him, he's going to come out yelling and screaming and fighting. And that's going to cause this massive distraction for people who are easily distracted, which, to be fair, was pretty much all of us for most of our lives.
Yes.
But it's time to no longer be able to be distracted by that. I woke up from it. Jimmy woke up from it first. And you can too if you haven't already. Like, just read some history. That's really all you got to do. You don't have to become super educated about markets and politics. Use a little common sense.
Yes.
And ask yourself, if things were really as bad, like over the last 3 years that they claimed, there would be, like from Monty Python, death cards. Bring out your dead, you know. They would have been stacking bodies on the street.
Yeah.
But we never saw that. I mean, nothing really seemed any different. The only thing different is people had a diaper on their face. That was really the only difference that I saw.
There have been so many things over the last 3 years, so many different incidents that the media has pushed, and we've already touched on them before, that the media has touched or put out there as fact. But come to find out, they were all fake, phony, and false.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a list like that long that we published, or that I put up on my YouTube channel in the community section. All these different things that the media pushed as truth. They were just distracting people one thing right after another. And when it comes to this, we've gotten, and this is one of I think the main topic we wanted touch on today was we've gotten to a point in history right now to where it's time for people to make a choice. It's time. Are you going to continue listening to the media, buying everything that they say? Are you going to continue participating in being divisive amongst one another? Because we know that's what they want to do. They want to divide the people. Now, if you put politics aside and go back to the money issue, the money issue doesn't know Republican or Democrat when it's in your bank account. Okay? Most people, all people I know, they want to make sure that they have food for their family. They want to make sure they have a roof over their head. They want to be able to put gas in their car. That is a subject that I think everybody can agree on, that we've been getting screwed as a people across the world, and we just want to be left alone and live freely. And like I said, we're at that point to where people need to make a choice between freedom or slavery. And I think we can say with no doubt in our minds that our lives, we've been slaves to this particular system.
And let me drop another truth about what Jimmy just said. Your money in the bank isn't really there.
Yeah.
Look up fractional reserve lending. You think your money is safely stored in the bank? No, it isn't. They don't have to keep but a tiny fraction. Actually, right now, none.
Yeah.
Trump actually passed that in 2020. They don't have to keep anything in the bank. So that bank that you think has your money in some vault somewhere, somehow, no, it does not. And banks can fail. SVB, Silvergate, Credit Suisse. And if there's not someone to back them up and bail them out, guess what? Your money's gone. And even when they get bailed out, what happens? They have to do that by producing more funny money, which dilutes the value of your money, even if you're not in that bank. So your money isn't safe. It's not even really yours. Go to a bank. Let's say you had $100,000, I wish, and you walked into a bank and you said, I want all my money in cash right now. They'd say no. That's what they would tell you. No, can't do that. And if you say why, they would say because we're not allowed to give it to you. They want to know why you want that money. Anything over $10,000, they're going to want to know why. They're going to have to fill out a report. They're going to have to send it into the government to track why you're pulling your money out of the bank. If you have to ask permission, it's not yours. So what you think belongs to you that sits in a bank doesn't belong to you. Never did. It's all part of the game.
Yeah, it sure is. So I printed off a photo here. This was a meme that was sent to me by one of my friends on my Facebook page, and it has freedom versus slavery. And
take a picture of that. I'll show it over the screen.
Okay. And so for the discussion that we've been having today on the slavery side, we've kind of touched on war for corporate profit. You know, we know that they play both sides of a war. That's documented. You can't dispute that. That's not a conspiracy theory. The military-industrial complex makes billions of dollars off of having a war. A cashless society, that's something that they want to go to.
Programmable money.
Yes.
Central bank digital currency. Look that stuff
based
up.
on your credit, your social credit system.
Yeah.
And if you're not being a good citizen, then guess what? You can't spend your money.
Or if you walk into the grocery store and you say, I want to buy some steak, and they say, no, you can't buy that with your card. Remember, this isn't really your money. What's in the bank doesn't really belong to you. And once your money's programmable, they can say, nah, you can't buy steak. You got to buy this bug powder that we want you to eat, because that's the thing now.
And they're pushing that narrative already.
Yeah. So central bank digital currencies, programmable money, also very sinister when in the hands of a government, which it will be.
Contrived cost of living crisis. That's on the slavery side. What's another money thing? Pedophile child abuse.
The digital ID is a big deal.
Yeah.
And I know people think, well, we don't live in China, and that's true. We don't yet. That's good. That's a good thing. We still have time. Yet is the pertinent word here. Look up the way it works there.
Yeah.
If you don't have the right social credit score, you can't get on a bus, you can't get on a train, you can't travel. There's all kinds of things you can't do because you have to have a pass to do all this stuff. And you can't. Now, we're lucky in the United States that we live under a federated system of states. States have a lot of autonomy from each other and from the federal government. And so they compete with each other for a lot of things. We were very lucky during the CV stuff. Like, look what Florida did. Look what Texas did. And I'm not condoning everything those states do, but look what they did when they saw what California and New York were doing and all the clamping down and the demands are like, hey, come here. We have none of those requirements. Spend your money with us. Florida had a program to hire police officers who didn't want to get jabs and all that, and pay them bonuses. And so they had huge financial incentive not to go along with what everyone else is doing or what some of the other states were doing. So they were competing. Most countries do not have that. There's one government. There may be a little bit of provincial this and that, but there's no state that has the majority of autonomy. So we're lucky in the United States that we have that. That really saved our bacon over the last 3 years, because look at Canada, look at Australia, look at the police states they turned into over the last few years. And nobody thought of those as anything but strong democracies prior to all this, because they don't have that federated system. So your freedom is not as powerful or not as strong or not as certain as you think under the law. Of course, it's inalienable. You're free because you're born free, whether anyone likes it or not, but they can try to stop that.
Yeah.
So look at China, look at the things they're doing, and ask yourself, do you want that to come here, whatever country, whatever state you live in? And if not, now is not the time to be squeamish or quiet.
What do you think about these stores now where you just scan your card or whatever, or scan? Have they gotten to the point where they put it in their hands already? Some places they have.
Oh, yeah, I heard about that.
And you just walk in, and there's no employees, and you can just go in. I think they just opened a McDonald's that has no employees there. But these stores, you go in, you pick something out, you put it in your cart, and it automatically rings up the prices, and they charge your card for it.
Let me tell you.
That's scary.
Let me tell you where I'm different,
folks.
This is where I'm different about things like that. I don't have a problem with technology, software developer. I have a problem with automation. I think GPT is one kick-ass piece of technology. If you haven't used it yet, it actually can write code now.
He sends me a lot of stuff on that.
Yeah, but
which I like. It's cool.
This is where I start to have a problem with it. I don't have a problem with the technology. I have a problem with centralized authority.
Thank you.
Centralized control of any technology. For instance, programmable money could be an amazing thing. Take, for instance, a Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin is also programmable money, but it's decentralized. There is no single authority that controls it. It's spread out on what's called nodes, tens of thousands of nodes all over the world, geopolitically diverse. No one has any controlling authority over what happens on the Bitcoin network. And therefore, no one can say, we're suddenly going to print more Bitcoin, making yours worth less, whereas the government has control over the money, so they can say, we're going to print more dollars, making yours worth less, whether you like it or not. The technology is beautiful. Well, I'm an introvert. Walking into a store and never having to see or talk to anybody is like I'm in heaven here. I have a dream come true. But who controls that? Who controls those dollars you're spending? Is there a single authority that can turn it on or off? That's the problem that I have. Not with the tech, but with the power, with the control. That's where my issue comes in.
Yep.
Yeah.
So over on the freedom side, when it comes to the financial side, let's see, we can have, let's see, where's one? Sovereign debt-free money. What's your thought on that?
I wish. That's my thought on that. The U.S. government is in debt to the tune of $31 trillion. That's with a T, people. T.
It's an unimaginable amount of money.
You know what it was in 2000? About $1 trillion. 30 times more in debt in the last 23 years. 130% of GDP, gross domestic product, the amount of work being done. You can think of it like that in the whole country. they're in debt 130% more than they earn.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for a normal citizen, if you were in that kind of debt, you would be bankrupt because you could not pay your bills. And the U.S. government's starting to have a very difficult time paying their bills. Things like Social Security, which gets more and more expensive and is actually scheduled to be bankrupt by about 2035, give or take. So I've been paying in my whole life, but by the time I get to the age where I retire, there's no money there. That money's gone. It's vaporware is what we call it in software. Like it's gone. It was never real. So they stole that from me to spend on other things with the promise that they were going to give it back. But of course they're not going to because, well, this is the government we're dealing with. And having money that is free of that debt, that cannot be printed, that allows self-sovereignty. And again, I go back to things like Bitcoin, like assets that are backed by something, whatever it is, or gold. Gold's just hard to custody. But whatever the thing is, anything other than a fiat currency, like the US dollar, that has real power-backed, gold-backed, asset-backed value, there's just no comparison. It can't be stolen from you in the same way. It would be difficult. They'd have to come to your door and demand it like they did in 1933 with the gold. Like literally, they have to physically wrench it out from you, which that could trigger civil war. So that's dangerous and difficult. But if they can just press a button and suddenly your money in the bank is worth less than it was and all that value has been transferred to them, that's what they're going to do. And that's why governments love fiat money, because it's so easy to control. And they don't have to ask your permission. It is a permissionless tax, is what it is. They're taxing you without passing a law, without having you vote on whether or not you want that tax to exist.
And that's what inflation is.
That's what inflation is, an unlegislated tax. Mm-hmm. That's what it is. People have been conditioned to think that inflation is normal and healthy because, it gets people to spend money so they don't hoard it. No, that's absolute BS. Inflation is unlegislated taxation. That's what that is. The government can take your money without your permission. Let me give you one example, and this is a good one. In 1980, you could buy a cup of black coffee for about 50 cents. 50 cents, that's what it cost. Today, now I'm not talking about a latte from Starbucks, $12 or whatever BS that is. A normal black cup of coffee, like a diner, you're going to pay about $2 to $2.50, right? 4 to 5 times higher cost than it was in 1980. However, the supply chain for coffee beans is 85 times more efficient today than it was in 1980. We should be paying a penny for a cup of coffee today because the technology has made it so much cheaper to create coffee. Mm-hmm. And yet it's gone up 4 to 5 times more. Why? Inflation. The dollar is worth less. So even though the coffee is much cheaper to manufacture than it was in the past, much more efficient than it was in the past, the dollar's worth less, so you pay more. The only thing that's accelerating fast enough to outrun inflation, generally speaking, is technology. Your phone, computers, computer chips, those double in performance, roughly. It's called, the law just slipped my mind. Anyway, there's a name for a law. It doubles every 18 months. Inflation can't beat that. Like technology is growing way faster than inflation can keep up with. So your TV is way cheaper now than it was 20 years ago for a big screen. I remember my first big screen TV was like $3,000. Yeah. Today you can get the same thing for $250. It's unreal. Everything else, price goes up because it cannot outpace the wild speed of inflation.
Yep.
And we need to get away from that, or we will never, the average person will never be okay. You should be able to go to work or work for yourself, whatever, make your money, pay your bills, put the rest in the bank, knowing that technology is growing so rapidly that your money will be worth far more in the future. Because technology is deflationary. It makes things cheaper as companies compete with each other to make things faster and better and cheaper to sell to you. It causes deflation.
But we do know that there's people out there that don't want to see that happen.
Of course they don't.
Because they're all about control
That's right.
and power.
If you can put money in the bank, knowing your money's going to be worth more tomorrow, 10 years, 20 years, you know you can retire early. My age, 46, I'm retired because I was smart and saved money. Who's going to be the wage slave for Walmart?
Mm-hmm.
They can't have people doing that. If everybody's like, well, I'm just going to work hard, live simple, put my money in the bank so I can retire early, then corporations have to compete with more money, better benefits to get you to actually go to work for them because you don't need to. Why would you do it? You don't need to. But with inflation, your money's worth less and less every year, which keeps you on a hamster wheel where you have to keep working harder and harder, faster and faster just to keep your head above water. This is by design.
Yep.
The system isn't broken. It's working exactly the way it's supposed to, except it's running up against that brick wall. Because you can only kick that can for so long before hyperinflation comes and we turn into Venezuela.
Yeah, and see, we're not going to go that route on this video tonight, but there's so many different things that are behind driving this issue, and it's political, it's geopolitical. There's just so much behind it. But I wanted to have this discussion with Jon tonight because I haven't really touched on the financial side of things. Y'all have seen my videos, y'all know what I talk about. But I was talking with Jon the other night. I was like, we got to do a video to get some financial stuff out. Now, he doesn't claim to be a financial advisor. I don't claim to be a financial advisor at all.
You don't even know if I'm wearing pants right now. You can't tell, so don't trust me. Just go look this stuff up. I could be some nut job in a basement. Which
I thank God he is wearing pants.
promise, pants, promise.
But I know that this is a subject that a lot of people, they just don't know a lot about. And that's that fear, putting your head in the sand and not even paying attention to it. But I wanted to talk about that this evening, or today, or whatever it may be, wherever you're at. What are you doing personally? I know you can't give no advice to anybody, but what are you doing personally to kind of hedge against inflation, hedge against a collapse of a banking system?
Hard assets. Gold is hard to keep. And again, 1933, they took that gold from everybody. But like whatever you can invest in that's a hard asset whose value doesn't change with like over time. Like a home will always have utility value. Always. Mm-hmm. So while the price may fluctuate, it's always going to have some value as an asset. A gold has been around for thousands of years, and it's a hedge against inflation. But again, it's confiscatable. I also hold some Bitcoin, which again, it's a hedge. Like there are hedges. What you don't want to, what I can't tell you what to do. I'm not a financial advisor. What I don't want to do is hang on to a whole lot of cash, because cash is inflating at a ridiculous rate. And the rate they admit to, the CPI, they call it, Consumer Price Index, total BS.
Yep.
They say it's 6%. It's 15% if it's 1. And if you look back at the calculation that they used to use in the 90s, before they changed it, it's over 15% right now. And you compound that every year that this stuff's going on, and it's going to get worse and worse and worse. One economist I follow, the way she put it, she said the United States is a third world country wearing a Gucci belt.
Yep.
That's what we're up against right now. It's a slow slog. The U.S. dollar is still stronger than the others, the other currencies of the world. So it takes time.
You know, it's kind of funny you say that. So the United States is a third world country wearing a Gucci belt, right? It just makes me think of just like your everyday Americans out there that they don't make a bunch of money, or they're living off the system, who have to have the $400 pair of shoes, or the $600 pair of pants, or that $1,400 iPhone, but you don't own anything. You're not worth anything financially, but you have this stuff. And I think that's one of the problems that the American people have had over the years, is just they've been inundated with having stuff. I look at my house sometimes. I walk through my house sometimes. I'm like, we got a lot of crap.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
You know?
We clear out this basement because we're in the basement periodically. Like, what is all this junk? Why did we get this stuff to begin with? And so we're much better about that now because I can see what's coming or what I believe is coming. And so I'm like, no, we get rid of everything we don't need. And Beth has always been like that. She calls it compulsive Spartanism, where she once sold the couch. I get home, I'm like, baby, where's the couch? She's like, I sold it. I'm like, but we need a couch. So, she's like, we don't need that. And I respect the hell out of that because she does not waste. My ex owned 300 pairs of shoes. I'm not exaggerating.
Oh.
I had to move them when we moved from Texas to North Carolina. I counted them 300, but they were everywhere under the beds in the closet. It was ridiculous. So I love Beth. Because she's not like that at all.
Yeah, neither's Carissa.
And right now is not the time to be blowing money on stuff.
No.
This is not the time.
No. Yeah, do not be blowing your money on crazy, frivolous stuff right now.
Yeah, hard assets. Well, we are at my hour limit.
Okay,
So
all right.
We got to
So I hope you guys enjoyed this video tonight. We only had an hour this evening.
Yeah.
And me and John, we could actually sit and talk for hours. As you've seen, we've done it before. But I hope you guys have enjoyed this video tonight. If you have any questions, send me some information. That's fine. Ask a question. If you like the video, hit like, subscribe. I'm going to put this on our Bitchute channel. Probably try to get it on my YouTube channel. We'll see how that goes. John's gonna produce all this stuff, and we'll talk about that.
It's a good thing YouTube jail doesn't go on your actual criminal record. Dude, you would never be able to work in this country again.
Between YouTube and Facebook, I have been jailed. And what does that tell you?
Your recidivism rate is terrible.
Yeah. You're so
or wonderful, depending on how you look at it.
Yeah, my social credit score, based off of that, I'd be like, I wouldn't be able to buy any cookies or coffee or anything.
There's a list, and Jimmy's name is in big, bold, red letters at the top of it.
So I know we didn't go down the road of some of the other stuff that's going on. But maybe me and John can actually get together. It's just been difficult. It's been a long time since we've been together. And it's ridiculous. We only live 45 minutes apart, but it's been like 6 months since we've seen each other.
We'll do it again soon.
Yeah, he's been busy. I've been busy. But I hope that this information has been valuable for you guys. And if you haven't seen any of the Big Picture episodes, please go to Bitchute, look up the Big Picture. We'll put a link in the description. I've got 11 episodes on there that if you're new to this channel and you go watch these 11 episodes, I'm telling you right now, there's enough information in those 11 episodes that can keep you digging for a year. I'm not even joking. There's so much going on in this world right now. People are scared. People are frustrated. All we're trying to do is give some semblance of calm. Don't freak out. Take a breath, because there's a lot more coming.
Ultimately, the power lies in the hands of the common person.
Yes.
Because we way outnumber
everybody
else. So stay calm, act rationally, work with your friends, work with your family, work with your community, and everything will be fine.
And just show love to one another. And when you're having conversations, try to be mutually respectful to one another.
Yes, please.
Try that. It's amazing what you can accomplish if you actually have real conversations and not trying to one-up each other because your ego's getting in the way. So that's what I got to say.
All right.
Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful evening.
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. What you can do for your country. Your country. Your country.